In this video, we're learning about attack types. Hi everybody, welcome to StudioSec. Thank you for watching. Like this video if it's helpful, comment down below with any thoughts you might have, and subscribe for more content I'm posting every week. Subscribing also helps a small channel like mine to grow, so I really appreciate your help. There are many different kinds of cyber attacks. Really, there's a ton. So we're gonna try to make this quick and easy for you to understand and reference anytime you need help. However, it's important to remember that knowing each type of cyber attack will really help you to attribute the attack to a particular threat actor. Here's a link right here to different types of threat actors. We actually discussed that last week. Also, knowing these types of attack will help you to know what kind of countermeasures you need to put in. You know, what kind of security protocols and different strategies you need to implement to make sure that you are secure when an attacker decides to implement a certain attack strategy. Also, and I've included a link in the description to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And this will kind of tie different attack types to different threat actors. And so knowing what kind of attacks are going on, that might kind of give you an idea on what threat actors you're really dealing with. So the first one that we're going to talk about is probably something you've heard of, and that's a denial of service attack. Of course, the goal of this attack is in the name. It's to deny service to a particular application or service that your organization provides. Another way this can be achieved is there's denial of service, but there's also distributed denial of service, where the attacker has what's called a botnet, or a network of robots, you know, where they've gained access to many different kinds of machines, and they're focusing all of those machines on your particular service. So if you were to see a distributed denial of service attack happen, it would appear that many different IP addresses are trying to ping your server. But really, it's just the botnet. There's one attacker using a botnet to try to deny service to your organization. And you can probably guess just from that description how this works is they're trying to overwhelm your organization's application's ability to handle requests. If it's a web server, it will try to go beyond the capacity of that web server to service requests. So legitimate requests are denied. Fortunately, the impact is limited to however long the attack persists. So it can only really go on for as long as you don't do anything about it. If the attacker just keeps it going on forever, then you can just start blocking the source IPs of the botnet, and you're able to regain access. This kind of attack does not gain access to any kind of infrastructure that you have. So it really is just denial of service. So like I said, blocking known malicious IPs can really help you avoid this kind of an attack. Also, using load balancing can be kind of helpful because you may have a denial of service situation occur that might have been accidental. Perhaps you have not a very robust web server that is handling multiple legitimate requests and is unable to do so. So clustering and using load balancing can help with that. The next attack type is phishing, and I'm sure you've heard about that. Phishing is whenever an attacker is trying to email a link to you or an employee or to whoever their target is, and to try to get that employee to click that. That link might redirect them to a malicious website or might download an executable. Whatever it's going to do, it's generally going to give the attacker access to your internal network. Of course, phishing also has variants, like whaling, where an attacker is sending a phishing attack to a high-ranking member of your organization, like your CEO or CFO, or even a CIO if you are the CIO. They also might try to do spear phishing, where they do reconnaissance on the target that they're going to try to phish and tailor the email to match what it is that they might actually click on. The impact of a phishing attack can mean that the bad guy can get access to your internal network. So it's a pretty big deal. Fortunately, this can also be an easy fix. Just enable email filtering and educate your staff on what phishing attacks are, and then train them, test their knowledge. Make sure that they do not click on links in emails. It's pretty simple. However, if they do not have that education and training, it can get very difficult to protect from. Next, we're going to talk about social engineering. Social engineering happens whenever the attacker tries to get somebody in an organization to do something that they know that they're not really supposed to do. Most of the time, it will be to give the attacker access to information or infrastructure. A common method that this happens is the attacker will pose as somebody that is high-ranking and tries to create a situation of high intensity where it's very time demanding, where they need somebody like quick in the next 30 minutes. I need you to give me access to this asset. Or in the next 2 minutes, I have to go, I have to move to this next meeting. Something like that ratchets up the stress and intensity, and it causes the employee to just be like, okay, I'll do it, fine. But that's not what you want. That's not what your organization needs to be secure. So you need to set up clear guidelines and procedures for these cases, so they pass this situation up to the manager without giving access, and making sure that only legitimate users have access who have authenticated that they are real and that this isn't a social engineering attack. Of course, this comes with training your staff to be able to recognize these situations and to be able to implement these strategies. The next type of attack would be cross-site scripting. This happens whenever an attacker embeds malicious code in a website. For instance, you probably have seen on some websites that they rely on Java to be able to allow certain functions of the website to happen. Well, an attacker might use that to embed malware in a website. So if you were to request a specific web page in a website, then that program would run, and it might attack the target's browser or their whatever it is that's contacting the web page. Ultimately, it can mean that the attacker can gain access to the target computer and to the wider network that host computer is on. To protect against this, allow only trusted, known, secure websites. Do not allow websites that you don't trust. Try to implement a trustless strategy where generally unless it's a site that and trust and for sure that it is a secure site, then you do not allow it. Also, of course, make sure that you train your staff on the risks of visiting websites that they're not familiar with, and to know exactly what can happen if they were to access a specific web page on an untrusted site. The next attack type is an SQL injection. And this happens whenever your website or whatever is web facing might rely on an SQL database to be able to store large amounts of information. Well, let's say on this website that it has an input field, and the attacker is able to type in an SQL query into the input field, and the web server actually takes that SQL query and retrieves the data from the database and displays it on the screen, as if they were to actually have had access to the SQL database itself. So this is easy to defend against because you can do input validation. So if you have an input field, it'll only accept inputs that it recognizes as legitimate. So say, for input first name, they cannot type in an SQL query into input first name. It'll only accept first names. Also, we're having stored procedures. So it's not going to, automatically run, an unauthorized SQL grab. It's only going to run, legitimate procedures that are actually intended to run on the web server. The next is man-in-the-middle attacks. And this can happen whenever the attacker is able to get between a legitimate conversation between two legitimate individuals. This can be a result of, poorly encrypted web traffic, or, allowing a replay attack to happen. There are a number of reasons that a man-in-the-middle attack can happen. It's fairly common, but you want to make sure that you make your organization resistant to these kinds of attacks. So ensure that your web traffic is properly encrypted. Make sure that whatever web servers your company is using to communicate with the internet is actually owned by you and not the attacker. And that can help with having an intrusion prevention and an intrusion detection system. And of course, whenever a transaction is complete, make sure that the session is closed to prevent a replay attack. The next type of attack is a drive-by download. And this can happen whenever the attacker, let's say for example, you're at a public coffee shop that offers free Wi-Fi for customers. Well, let's say an attacker sets up a spoofed internet network, and they use the exact same name as that coffee shop's Wi-Fi network, and they even on the sign-in page use the exact same page layout as the coffee shop's network. So if you were to log into that network, it would look and feel exactly like it would if you were logging into the real coffee shop's Wi-Fi network. However, there might be a transparent link that you don't even see. Or it might be, as you're logging in, you click a link on the site that downloads malware onto your machine. Or it could be that, you have Bluetooth turned on or AirDrop turned on if you have an Apple machine, or, something like that allows easy file transfer between devices close or nearby. An attacker can just push malware through that protocol. Now, generally, if you keep these patched, that can be, pretty uncommon for that to happen, but it does happen. So make sure that you're keeping Bluetooth turned off whenever you're not using it. And you're only using trusted Wi-Fi that is secure. For instance, don't use public Wi-Fi networks to get work done. The next type of attack is a password attack. And this happens whenever the attacker is able to gain access to a password repository, or maybe they're trying to guess a user's password to gain access to a particular account. There's a link right here actually talking about password security, and I go way more in depth on this topic on that video, so be sure to check it out. But the main thing to remember is that the attacker is trying to break the encryption or get the correct hash of the password to gain access to the account. The last type of attack that we're going to talk about is a malware attack. And this is really a much less common, but also a much more technical and potentially lethal type of a cyber attack. And this happens whenever an attacker is attacking unpatched and unupdated and unsecure systems in a target network. This happens whenever they're using malicious code and they're pushing it into a server, and they're using exploits for vulnerabilities, and they're gaining access to your network using a more technical style of attack. They're not really talking with employees. They just see that a particular port is open and they're attacking that port. To protect against this, make sure that you're installing patches and updates, and making sure that if a service isn't running or if it's not needed, that the ports linked to that service are not open. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking. This is a lot to think about and consider when trying to secure your organization, and that's intimidating. There's really a lot to do, but the good news is generally you need to implement common sense security and best practice cybersecurity strategies, and for the most part you'll be okay. Make sure that you train your staff. Your staff can be your worst weakness, but they can also be your greatest asset. So make sure that they're educated on these different concepts. Send them my videos if they're helpful, and make sure that your organization is secure, from these different types of attacks, using common sense and best practice strategies. Speaking of which, there's a link right here to a video I've made on how to secure your business if you're a small to medium-sized business. So to make sure that you've retained all this information, pop quiz. Comment down below with your answers. What is cross-site scripting? So be sure to put your answer in the comment down below, like if this video was helpful, and subscribe for more content I'm posting every week. Thank you.